When we think about what causes violent conflict, a few usual suspects always pop into our heads. But what if the real trigger is something we almost never talk about? Something kind of hiding in plain sight, right there in a country's economic data. Today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating study that followed these economic clues to uncover a surprising driver of communal violence.
All right, let's just get right into it. What truly sparks a conflict between two communities? The answers feel obvious, don't they? We hear them on the news all the time. But this particular research suggests we might be looking in all the wrong places.
So these are the usual suspects that researchers would line up. You've got religion, ethnic divisions, political power struggles, and then on the economic side, it's pretty much always assumed that poverty and a lack of economic growth are the main culprits. And look, on the surface that totally makes sense, but the evidence we're about to see, well, it tells a very different story.
To solve this puzzle, the researchers needed like a real-world laboratory, and they found the perfect one, Indonesia. Let's take a look at why this nation was such a unique and perfect place to test these long-held beliefs about conflict.
I mean, Indonesia is just incredibly diverse. We're talking thousands of islands, with this huge mix of cultures, ethnicities, and religions all living together. Now, that diversity is often a huge strength, but it also creates a lot of potential friction. And that makes it the ideal place to hunt for consistent patterns, to see what factors really stand out when you analyze the data across all these different regions.
And here's just a little snapshot of the kind of raw data the researchers were working with. You can see across 16 different regions, there are huge variations in both religion and the number of conflicts. For example, look at Aceh, it's 99% Muslim, while Papua is majority Christian. Yet Papua had more than double the number of violent incidents. The challenge was finding a common thread, some economic link that could connect these wildly different outcomes.
So the researchers took all this data and used a pretty powerful statistical model. It's called a cis-GMM estimator, for those of you who are curious, to basically put each of the usual suspects on trial. They just followed the evidence one by one to see which factors, if any, actually held up.
First up to the stand, economic growth. You know the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats and calms things down. But when the researchers tested this idea, they found, well, nothing. There was no real statistical link. A growing economy didn't automatically mean a more peaceful one. So, on to the next suspect.
Okay, so if it's not about overall growth, it's got to be poverty, right? That is the classic explanation, that desperation leads to conflict. But, and this is pretty incredible, the data showed the exact same thing. No significant link. Poverty itself wasn't the direct predictor they were looking for either. This is getting interesting.
And now for what might be the most surprising result of all, religion. I mean, given Indonesia's history, this seemed like a sure thing. But the model showed that a region's religious makeup was not the direct statistical cause of conflict. Now, the paper's really clear. Religion can absolutely be a channel for violence, but something else was lighting the match.
So, wait a second. If our three main suspects are all basically innocent, what is left? If the things we've always been told are the root causes of conflicts don't actually predict it, then what does? Well, the researchers found one economic clue that stood out from all the rest.
And this brings us right to the heart of this entire study. After they eliminated all the usual suspects, one hidden culprit was left standing, a factor that consistently and robustly predicted a rise in conflict. Inflation. That's it. Not how rich or poor a region was, not how fast its economy was growing, but how stable its prices were. The rate of inflation, that was the key.
And this is the number that really tells the whole story. Positive 0.15%. Now, in economics, this is called an elasticity coefficient, which is really just a fancy way of measuring how much one thing changes when you change something else. And I know 0.15% might look tiny, but its implications are absolutely massive.
So what makes this little number so important? Well, first off, inflation was the only economic factor that had a consistent, significant link to conflict. It was the signal in all the noise, and the number shows a direct relationship. For every small, sustained increase in inflation, the study predicted a 0.15% increase in how fast conflict was growing. This whole thing points away from poverty and toward a totally different culprit, economic instability.
The study's conclusion just puts it perfectly. It's not just about how much wealth there is, it's about volatility.
An unstable economy, where people's savings and their ability to plan for the future are just getting eaten away by rising prices, that creates the conditions where social friction can easily ignite into real conflict.
So what's the big takeaway here? This finding gives us a completely new lens for looking at conflict. It suggests that focusing on stability might be just as important, maybe even more important, than just focusing on growth all the time.
And it's so important to get this core concept. Economic instability is not the same thing as poverty. You can have a pretty well-off society that is highly unstable, or a poor society that's actually very stable. What this study shows is that it's the volatility, those rapid, unpredictable changes in the cost of living, that seems to be a powerful, hidden driver of social tension.
And really, that's the ultimate lesson here. The things we see on the surface, the religious or ethnic labels that often get attached to a conflict, they might not be the root cause at all. As this research shows, sometimes the real driver is a deeper, less obvious economic pressure that affects everybody, creating an environment that's just ripe for division.
So that leaves us with this huge question, right? If something as seemingly boring as the inflation rate can have such a profound impact on social peace, what else are we missing? What other hidden economic or social or even environmental drivers are we completely overlooking while we just keep focusing on the usual suspects? This study proves we need to keep digging.